Am I out of view?
Okay. Are we ready?
Yeah, okay. So this is introduction on Podemos, Syriza, Linke. What do they represent and how should socialists relate to them for Strafford?
Okay, so we have an exceptionally exciting moment happening in southern Europe, in Greece and in Spain. We can see the mass movements that have emerged since the austerity crisis. They're beginning to, flex their political muscles. But where I want to start is not the immediate situation, but 1989 and 1991 and the immediate process that followed the collapse of what some would have called really existing socialism, but the Stalinist states in the Eastern Bloc. Now, for many, that was obviously, the official Communist Party is a huge disaster. Many of my comrades told me that they wept as the Berlin Wall was falling in front of them on the television. But it also impacted on not just the Stalinist left and the official communists, but it also social democracy, Trotskyism, and all other dissident currents that had emerged through the 20th century. And it was both catastrophic in terms of what it meant for the left, but it was also liberatory. It was a great moment of liberation in terms of freedom of choice, some kind of democracy within the former Eastern communist states. Whenever we had the horrors of the economic crisis, the opening up of the markets, the collapse in living standards, which have only recently recovered. So it really posed a question for the communist left and for those who wish to build something other than a capitalist society. Posed a question of what do we do? Where do we go? Is it over? Have we come to the end of the line? Some obviously did think that we'd come to the end of the line. Many opted for the road of social democracy instead of anti-capitalism and communism. The Italian Communist Party epitomised that tendency when they moved towards social democracy and to now a social liberal formation in Europe. Whilst in Africa we saw the ANC gave up on its promises of a social transformation. We can see where that has left the majority of South African workers today. So out of this, the left attempted to answer that crisis, the horrors of the 20th century that we've understood, but also to weigh up the gains that were made as well, whether through welfare states, social security, or the gains that were made in the Soviet Union. And they all pose different organisational problems for the left. If we look at the Linke, coming from the former Stalinist party, linking up with new radicals and those leaving the SPD, how were they to come together and put together a cohesive alternative? We have Syriza, who primarily politically dominated, though probably not numerically dominated, by Euro-communist current Synapsimos, and then more recently Podemos in Spain, which has obviously got the left very excited, and with good reason as well. To start with the Linke, what we're dealing with the Linke is a real significant political force in German politics. Its membership is 63,000, 64 deputies in the parliament, 160 state parliament members, 7 MEPs, and I'm sure comrades saw that in the week that they've taken Thuringia. They know the prime minister is Bado Ramelow, if my pronunciation is correct, who's the Linke prime minister of that German state. For lots of the left across Europe, the Linke became a real model for where we could go. After we saw the disaster of Communist Free Foundation in Italy after it joined the government and lots of different alliances and back in the second Prodi governments. What we have there, what was developed over the last few years since it came together, is a left social democratic formation. We can see that it brought together a broad range of different tendencies and different opinions. Trotskyists, Marx 21, which is was, or it still is, the sister organisation of the Socialist Workers' Party. Obviously the former ruling party of the German Democratic Republic, but also those leaving the SPD as well. And they did have some radical visions, but we should be careful not to read too much into that. It should be remembered that the Party for Democratic Socialism, which was the successor organisation of the Eastern German ruling party, when it adopted its basic programme, basically said that it was not against the social market economy, that it was therefore softening the edges of capital, defending the welfare state, not for a fundamental rupture with capitalist society. And there's been mixed experiences. Obviously there's very radical elements within the Linke who want to push a more anti-capitalist line. So in the recent, in 2011, when they had their congress at Erfurt, they did opt for a package of motions and a programme that was for a fundamental transformation of society. But then what we have in Berlin, where Die Linke has been part of the government, or was part of the government for over 10 years, in a red-red coalition with the Social Democrats, is cuts, attacks on workers, and a real stifling of democracy within the party there. The party is electoralist in a very straightforward sense. Its entire strategy is about mobilising its base and mobilising its members in the same way that social democracy did in the post-war years, around elections and for getting in and for making sure that they're ready to govern. Le Fontaine says that we're here to govern, and we're constantly leading to compromise. Then we have Syriza, who started off as a coalition of the left, coalition of the radical left even, which currently has 71 deputies in the parliament, 6 MEPs, 144 municipal councillors. So again, another sizable party that had broad support. It brought together again those who had left the official Communist Party, the KKE, and those who may have joined the what was previously called the Communist Party of Greece Interior, which developed in certain different ways towards Euro-communism, with the group that I mentioned earlier, which Alex Tsipras, which is obviously the poster boy and the leader of Syriza, was in that and came through that kind of current. But there are also the Maoists, the communist organisation of Greece. There's also Manolis Glesos, who is the famous resistance fighter who you see a lot on TV. His group is a very small group, I believe, compared to others, active citizens. And of course, there are lots of different Trotskyist organisations as well, and environmentalists and what have you. And what was interesting about Syriza when it was formed to fight elections, and he did get small and very small results. So 2004, 3.3%, 2007, 5%. Then it dropped again to 4.6 in 2009. Then we had the crisis, obviously, the real political crisis in Greece after PASOK was incapable and refused to carry out the promises they made in 2009. And in the two elections in 2012 in May and then in June, Syriza went from 16.8% to 26.9%. And now we see them running at 31%, and likely if Antonio Samaras does not get his way in Parliament, leading to the creation of a Syriza government. Helped along by the undemocratic rule in Greek elections, that if you're the first party with the most votes, you get a 50-seat top-up in the Parliament to guard against political minorities and what have you. This poses a very interesting question for the left, how we respond and how we think about this. There's already been quite a few articles that have gone around the left. One by Andrew Bergen, who's a Left Unity comrade, she's now on the Left Unity website, but also on the Left Nationalist website, New Left, I can't remember the name, the Scottish nationalist formation that's come out of the RIC, leading members of RIC. I think when we're posed with the question of power, obviously the question of programme comes up. And throughout the media, obviously, when we had the elections in 2012, there was lots of attacks on Syriza saying, if they come in, there'll be chaos, they won't be able to implement what they want, they will destroy Greece, Tsipras is aiming as a little Venezuela or a little Cuba. In many ways that helped Samaras and his political allies win that election. So what are they really for? So they're not against a repudiation of the debt. They're for a haircut, which is basically a restructuring of the debt payments that Greece owes, and for writing off a certain level of debt. Therefore, leaving the state intact, with the exception of the anti-insurrectionist units. The anti-insurrectionist units, which the successor military organisations of the Gladio units, which were formed primarily to stop left-wing governments taking power or revolutionaries making inroads in society in Greece after the Second World War. And then they're for obviously investment, not austerity. How they fund that investment is through European Central Bank bonds. Whether the EU and Merkel and the ECB would accept that is obviously another question. It would depend on the strength and balance of forces, not just in Greece, but across Europe. They obviously want to improve healthcare, but fundamentally, what's on offer is not a breach with capitalist society. And what we, the hopes of the left that having a left government could inspire others across Europe could turn into its opposite if we're not careful. If we have a left government in Greece that's incapable of delivering its promises, even its very limited promises of rolling back on austerity, restructuring the debt, creating jobs, improving healthcare, we'll find ourselves in trouble not just in Greece but here, across Europe. And the capitalists as well. I mean, there's been a lot of talk in the Financial Times and in other papers and other journals about what would a Syriza government do. Some are more laid back, or some more accepting that actually Syriza, Podemos and others are really the only ones with the fingers on the pulse, that actually there needs to be some sort of restructuring of the debt, and otherwise we'll end up with social catastrophe. However, I mean, will the main capitalist powers in Europe accept a left government in Greece? It's unclear. There could be capital flight, extra pressure from the European Union and the IMF and the auditors. The state, especially the military, may not like the way it's going and may intervene. And the only real defence that Syriza has, if it does win the elections, would be that the masses, the working class, would be there to defend them and push them and force them along the road that they've promised, and to defend them against reactionary attempts to stymie even their most limited programme. There is also then that brings into question, can we break austerity in one country? Can we break capitalism in one country? Greece, which is exceptionally relatively small economy in relation to the rest of the European Union, it seems unlikely to do that. Even though that poses the question of the balance of forces, not just in Greece, which seemingly are looking favourable for our side, but across Europe, and they're not looking that favourable for our side. Having said that, I'll move on to Podemos, which has been only been going since the 16th of January this year. Their organisation is huge. 270,000 people are signed up. They have 6,000 people alone in their external organisation. That's 3 times as much as what Left Unity claims to have in its internal organisation in Britain. So you can see the real energy and the real dynamism build in Podemos. My housemate is a member of one of the external circles in Manchester. I went to a meeting with them and met with Spanish comrades who are in Podemos Manchester. And it's actually really interesting to see and to listen to their experiences and what they think. None of them had gone through the left. None of them had a formal Marxist education through the Communist Party of Spain or any of the Trotskyist groups, or they've not gone through any of the syndicalist and anarchist groups that exist in Spain. They're hostile to the unions. I don't know if comrades saw, but the UGT recently broke in the news. There's a massive corruption scandal going on at the moment in Spain, which has affected both the Socialist Party and also the centre-right party, Populares. PP, yeah. PP. But also the UGT are also mixed up in this as well. And there's a great deal of mistrust by, the comrades I'm speaking to are all aged between 20 and 35. Great deal of mistrust to not just the established political parties, but also the establishment as it is seen. So the UGT, CCOO, who are the 2 main unions, but also even... Sorry? Yeah, the main union confederations. But also distrust of the more radical unions as well. The CGT, which was one of the successor organisations of the historical CNT, which was the Anarcho-Syndicalist Trade Union Confederation, most commoners will know from history. And they were very hopeful about the situation in Spain now that Podemos has come along. They'd gone through the Indignados movement. Some of them had been involved in different waves, so they have different waves which will focus on ecology or housing or feminism, or involved in campaigns against house repossessions and what have you. They will all accept the statements that that Pablo Iglesias and his colleagues made only at the beginning of the year, which was titled "Making a Move, Turning Indignation into Political Change." And when I spoke to them, they all agreed with this. They all said, there were thousands and thousands of us all in the squares, from all walks of society, all opposed to the austerity measures, all opposed to the new government. But then the elections came, and what happened? The PP won, and austerity continued regardless. And it's taken a bit of time for them to reflect on that. And the answers that they're coming up with is, we need a party. we need to stand, we need to put clear politics forward, and we need to, we need to make fundamental change in society. Obviously, there are some of the left groups involved in Podemos. The sister organisation of the Socialist Resistance Group in Britain, Anti-Capitalist Left, is involved, was involved in setting up of it. But for the most part, mainly those who've come from the Indignados movement, those who have been pissed off living at home, students who have gone through, had their degree, but then have no jobs at all. So unemployment's running around 50% for young people in Spain. So you get a real sense of a workers' party in the making, in formation. Obviously, the leadership obviously does have that formal education in Marxist politics that the majority of the membership doesn't. Pablo Iglesias, the very telegenic leader of Podemos, has been in different communist organisations. The Young Communists, then was involved in the United Left, and of course, that gives a certain amount of power, and that experience gives those kind of comrades a certain amount of power in the organisation. And you can see that there's this talk of doing politics differently, which Left Unity has taken up on its masthead, on its website. We have to consider how far that has gone. And there are problems arising, and comrades, if you follow the discussions on the internet and what have you, power has been concentrated around Pablo Iglesias and his team. But there's a ban on formal political organisations standing for the leadership body, the Citizens Council. When I asked the comrades in Manchester about these things, some were obviously slightly alarmed by that. Some were cynical about Pablo Iglesias himself, but for the most part, they saw that as something not necessarily too much to worry about, as the key question facing the Spanish working class at the current time was ending austerity. We could, again, lots of the papers have been talking about Podemos' programme and what it would do if it came to power. Obviously, recently announced different things, and again, it wants to restructure the debt. It also wants to lots of different social democratic reforms. Change the housing law. So at the moment, there's no personal bankruptcy law in Spain. So if you lose your home and it's repossessed, but then it'll be sold on by the bank or whoever, but it'll be sold at obviously at a lower rate of what it's worth. But then you're still liable for the rest of that, and you'll be ended up paying that off for the rest of your life, which does mean obviously keeps you in poverty for possibly the rest of your life. So there's a groundswell of support to get those kind of things changed, to get jobs there, and for to see that the thousands, the tens of thousands of Greeks, Spaniards who have left Spain want to be able to go back. The one common thing that they when I was speaking to these comrades said that we want to go back. We obviously want to go home, want to be with our families. We maybe have jobs in Manchester or wherever, but ideally we did our degree there, or we have family there, or whatever. It's just impossible for young people to carve out a life there. They've also set up what mirror industrial committees to form policy. So they bring in experts in nursing and healthcare, as well as party members and those who use services to formulate policy. Very similar to what the old communist parties used to do with their industrial commissions, to try and figure out how would we run things, what would be next. That does seem to be does seem to be useful. So, I mean, some conclusions. The obvious thing about Podemos and Syriza is that the left can still garner mass support. The ideas of a different society, the idea that there is an opposition to the free market and to austerity is still mass support. You know, the collapse in '89 and '91 was not a total defeat. You know, what we also see is that capital will seek to co-opt those parties. So finance ministers and those of the IMF and the different debtors meeting with Syriza officials, or leading to the toning down of programmes and becoming more realistic as they become closer to power. What that danger spells a pass-off danger, for both Podemos and also Syriza, that you go into the election promising all of this, but when you get in and you can then say, well, we've looked at the books and we can't do it. Again, a repeat of history. Although this demands something actually quite important for us as communists and for those who want to see a break with capitalism. And that is extreme opposition. That we will not enter government, so we will not take power unless our minimum programme, that is not the minimum programme of building more houses or defending the welfare state, it's the minimum programme of democratising society, fundamentally beginning to alter and relate social relations, capitalist relations in society. That would be the time that we would take power. Whether left, what this leaves open to when parties of the left do not do this, is the danger that they will be co-opted, defeated. We have lots of examples. Chile and Allende in Chile is just one of the most obviously brutal ones. Spanish Republic, the Second Spanish Republic, which is an interesting point. Negri, who was the last Prime Minister of the Second Republic, is from the same university as Pablo Iglesias. So we need to be careful not to repeat history over and over again. So, I mean, the lessons for us, I think, is not this. I mean, there's obviously great excitement on the left of Podemos, and rightly so. It's not about copying them, or which the British left and other sections of the European left tend to do as well, and the French left. And we tend to copy what looks good elsewhere. So I mean, everyone really was interested in 2009 in building an anti-capitalist party in Britain. Yes. After the new anti-capitalist party had been formed. Obviously, after that fad wore off, we were very much interested in building the British Syriza. That fad has also worn off as well. But now we're really interested in building the British Podemos. I think there's positives and negatives to that, obviously. But I mean, the clear thing is that the left is so separated from day-to-day struggle, so separated from political life in Britain, that it can live on fads. But the lessons are not whether you change your language so you can have someone who's very telegenic and can speak like Pablo Iglesias on telly. It's not so we can form like a romantic new anti-capitalist party like of all of that. The lessons are quite simple, really. We have to take elections seriously, because that means taking politics seriously in capitalist society. The British left doesn't do that. The Linke has done that. Whatever we think about the Linke and its programme, it takes elections very seriously. And when working class people go to poll booth, there they have a Workers' Party there to vote for, whether they agree with it entirely and whether it delivers on everything that it says is another question. We do not have that. We need partyism. And I think that's the brilliant lesson, I think, that the comrades who I spoke to coming out of the Indignados, that yes, we have a mass movement. You know, you could, dozens and dozens of general strikes in Greece and in southern Europe, but not a single left government. You know, not a single. You know, the austerity measures are still rolling on. So we have to take partism seriously, the building of a party. You know, Ed asked in his morning talk, how long is this project for? How long is the building of a project for? It's a lifetime project. You know, it's a project of decades. You know, it started in 2004. I'm very small. It was only the crisis that has propelled it to the situation that it's in now. In Britain, relatively shielded from the crisis. You know, it's a long-term game. We have to have patience. We have to have patience to build a party. So when mass movements erupt, there is a historic, you know, there's an organisation there that has historical memory, that has a programme that can offer an alternative to those coming onto the streets. The other lesson, obviously, is democracy, not just in the working class movement, but in society overall. Podemos is obviously feeding on this and is built on this and built on all the citizens' assemblies and the, you know, the occupations that have taken place and all the different things that happen at a municipal level. One of the interesting things that Podemos is doing is it's not fighting the local elections under its own banner. It's drawing together a coalition of those who are fighting, you know, health cuts or, you know, closure of women's centres, what have you, or ecologists in lots of different areas, and bringing together an anti-capitalist, an anti-austerity front to fight the municipal elections. And it has a sense that there is real participation, at least at the grassroots in Podemos. Though, of course, we should caution that with my comments earlier that Pablo Iglesias and the team around him look set to, you know, to have a more control in hand than what we would expect in a democratic workers' party. You know, these parties all represent in some way an answer to the questions posed by the collapses in '89 and '91 and that period afterwards. You know, these are experiences that the working class has to look at, that communists here and abroad need to think deeply about, and not just we not just dismiss the experience of Podemos. You know, we should be very careful, extremely careful, to say no, it's just populism, social democratic populism, or you know, it's just electoralism. You know, we should be careful to see what the real dynamic that's at work in those societies and how we learn from that, whilst at the same time maintaining our criticism of a revived social democracy in southern Europe. Thanks.
Thanks very much.